Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another installment of the Hillen Brothers podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Brandon Jones, and I'm with the legendary Sam Simmons. How's it going today, Sam?
It's good. How about you?
It's going all right, man. It's going all right. Sunday, the holiday season, football's on. Vikings making comebacks to the Lions, which we should not be making a comeback to the Lions, but that's what happens here in the Twin Cities when our sports teams, can't get too excited, can't get too disappointed. Just gotta be even kill, as they say.
Right, right, right. I hear you.
But what's going on, man? There's the continuation of trauma in the community continues to happen. It's like we don't get a break. It's like every other day we got something happening.
Yeah.
And it's not just Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin Cities thing. It is something that is taking place all across the nation. Non-stop trauma, non-stop violence. It makes me wonder, and for our topic for the day, how are the children and where can children feel safe? If they can't feel safe at home, where do our children feel safe? And when I say our children, I'm including folks who are over the age of 18 up to about 24 years old. I'd like to extend the age of adolescence due to just brain development. We could talk more about that as well. But where do people feel safe if they can't even feel safe at home? Just doing things like jumping on trampolines, as we see in the summer, playing video games, watching TV with family members, doing homework. You have bullets flying, violence in the home, violence outside the home, and this non-stop trauma going on.
Well, I often, because I've done work over the years around domestic violence and all domestic violence, uh, uh, community violence, and that kind of thing. And the one thing, you know, um, that always amazes me is as much as we say, we talk about children, um, how often they get kind of left out of the conversation. I mean, again, it's just like anything else. You say, "Oh, the children are our future," and all this other kind of stuff. But um, I found when you focus the conversation about children, especially when we're talking about domestic violence, when I'm dealing with my men, I mean, really get them to focus on the effects of the violence in the home and the effects of violence in the home and in particular also the neighborhood, how they're connected in an interesting way that the men, if we can just get them narrowed down to that, they seem to be able to hear you, right? Because as much as we talk about how much concern we are for our children and that kind of stuff, I don't know if we always consciously put them at the center of the safety, right? And then when we start seeing violence out of children or young people, then we want to talk about what's wrong with them, right? Just like they were hatched, and uh yeah. And the other thing is I've told this story in the past where in the story in the past where you, I was watching a video during the Iraq war, the Middle East war. That we just left, and it really kind of shook me a little bit, and when I watched this video, so you got this war going on in the Middle East, and they wanted to know how it was affecting the people who are living there, who weren't soldiers, who weren't in the battle, and those kind of things, right? And they went into this home, and there was this little girl in the house, and she had a little doll, you know, and what was interesting to me is how safe the child appeared to be, right? How, in you got this stuff going on outside, but in that home, this child had this sense of, you can see this sense of safety, sense of love in the child's face in this home with the battles going on around them, right? And the reason I think it got me is that that has not always been what I've seen for some children, even in our own community, right? And that's has stuck with me, right? And then with the work we do around adverse childhood experiences, um, how important early childhood is, and the emotional foundations, and the foundation of early brain development and those kind of things, and the effects of toxic stress on this brain development, that how important the idea of focusing on the safety of children in the home. And then the next piece is that there was a survey done in North Minneapolis. And for our folks who are not from here, North Minneapolis is one of our considered one of our black neighborhoods. And and it was it's been a while. It's been over, I think it's been over 8 years or so. I lose track of years now that I'm old. But they surveyed and asked the kids, where do you feel safe just in that neighborhood? Do you feel safe at home? Do you feel safe in the community? Do you feel safe at school? And and there was answers in all three of those areas. But when they calculated all three areas, there was over 50% of the kids that said they didn't feel safe in neither one of those places. And so it amazes me how surprising we are in some of the behavior and what we're seeing in the community, especially after all of that has transpired over the last year and a half, 2 years, that validated some of the beliefs in some of our young people, even though they that might not say it, but act it out. We're like, who really does care? Who really is telling me the truth? Right? I mean, and then all the access they have to information about governmental kind of stuff and all the
Mhm.
shadiness there. And it's like, okay, so if everybody else is shady, why shouldn't I be shady? Why should I care about what happens to other folks when I don't really feel like folks care about what's happening to me? That's why that's important.
Mm. So you start talking about brain development and how the home and that environment, that setting is extremely important to the outcomes for children. And we've often hear that it takes a village to raise a child. And one of the themes of the conference a few years ago was the village is on fire. That was a few years ago. That was pre-pandemic.
Right.
Things were not as intense as they are now. If the village was on fire at that point, what would you say the village is at now?
Oh, uh, now we're an intense fire right now.
Inferno.
Yeah, and
Not to
the thing
laugh. It's
is,
not funny.
yeah. See, you laughing. See, I'm gonna have to disown you, for that, you know. But the thing is, the problem is, it's so overwhelming, right? The issues, and it's not that people don't care. It's like, where do you start,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things is sometime we look at these issues in one at a time, and not as collectively as we might need to, right?
Mhm.
So now a lot of the focus is on what's going on right now, right? The immediate
Mhm.
issue. And the immediate issue is serious, right? Um, and so you got right now, and then, depending on what part of this conversation you come from, we talk about all these external things. We talk about poverty, we talk about homelessness, and we talk about all these other pieces. And then when we start talking about safety in the house and talk about parenting and that kind of stuff, then what we'll do is we'll sidetrack folk, and go back to, what about poverty and homelessness? And if you're dealing with that, then that affects your parenting. That's true, but I also think that what affects people's parenting even more is how they were parented, and how they were parented in crisis, right? And how much support did their parents get during their childhood, right? Because trauma affects, if we can deny it all we want, but trauma affects how we parent, good or bad. It can have an effect on it. Now, the more we ignore the trauma, or the more we make trauma behavior, uh, put it in a normal kind of, the normal slot, right? Um, then it becomes even more apparent, right? And show up in the parenting. Because again, I refer back to the work I've been doing with young men and even young women. And when I talk to them about parenting and that kind of thing, the first thing that comes up too often is, well, there's not enough discipline. Now let me explain to you that in my men's group, majority are in my men's group because there was some kind of conflict with their partner, and majority, 70% or more of those partners are the children, or the mothers of their children, right? And so they're in my group, but they want to talk about, you know the other parent, as often happens, but they never seem, until I bring it up, the connection of that traumatic event, which in a lot of cases there was more than one traumatic event. It's just the one they got caught up in that involved the legal system, right? Effect on their children. The children is not even part of the conversation, right? And so, but when I ask about what's going on in the community, or what's wrong with the community, is there's no discipline. And then I said, what do you mean by discipline? Well, back in the day, if I did something like that, I got beat down. And it's like, okay. Then I pause, and and then I'll say, well, how does that? You got kids, right? Yeah. How do you deal with? So how does that show up with you and your kids? And they said, oh no, I don't beat my kids. Well, if you're gonna suggest that is what need to be done, but you telling me you don't beat your kids, what happened? And you want to hear crickets? You hear crickets. I can't hear you.
So let's talk about it, because you've heard it over the years. I've heard it over the years. But people always want to go to discipline,
Right.
and discipline from the parents onto the children to being the answer or the solution why we're in the space and place that we're in today. I don't think that it's that easy of an answer. And I don't think that the discipline that we talk about was even that even it even worked back in the day when when things were quote unquote all good. And if it was just as easy as beating our kids and keeping them in line in order for us not to see the things that we see today in the community, I think we would have solved this problem a long time ago. So I find that a very cop out answer, and I also find it to be very problematic, simply because if it's only discipline and you're saying these parents are disciplined, who's raising them, and what happened to the community where you can get your head knocked off 5 times before you got home and then your dad got to you? Where did that community go? And if that's what worked, what happened, and how did we lose that if it did work even at that time?
Well,
So go ahead.
go ahead. No, you can go ahead. I'm not interrupt you this time.
That's fine, you can interrupt. I just find that a fascinating answer to this question is like violence with violence. And now if the police give us that discipline and they knock a few people upside the head, then we want to march and protest, and then we want to get mad. So who's delivering the discipline? If that's the answer, it's not working.
Well,
Go ahead.
and the other thing we got to be clear about and be aware of, there's a balance in some of this, right? Because some people will get down and talk about, beatings versus spankings, or swats on little 1 or 2 year old hands because they're trying to pull at some electricity and that kind of stuff, right? Usually when they're having this conversation, that ain't what they're talking about.
No.
Or even the idea of the whole idea of sparing the rod, because people like to get biblical on me every now and
Justifying the
then,
BS with the Bible.
and not know my background, right? I have to clarify with them. I have a background. There was one time folks thought I would have made a good preacher, but it didn't quite work out that way. So I do have I'm a little bit removed from my Christian training, but I ain't forgot it, right? So the thing is the whole idea of the symbolic idea of sparing the rod means that you are not going. You got to be invested. You got to, and part of that investment, that does not mean that you necessarily got to be what we call easy on children or on a person. It's called, I like to call it compassionate accountability, which means that I show you compassion in my efforts to help you be accountable, right? And that all or nothing kind of response that we do within the house, and then we want to scream and holler when the system deals with us the same way,
Right.
all or nothing. And then we want to talk about our history. We got to understand that as much as we don't like it, our history, especially if we got American slavery in our background, our history has an effect on how we respond to each other and our children as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And so that all or nothing, get your attention in the right now, not showing people patience. I'm not a promoter of allowing some child to overrun me, or that kind of stuff, run the house or that kind of stuff. But I have to be open to be patient enough to hear what they're going, what they're saying, what they're going through. Because when you're dealing with like teenage children, it's like there's times when you think that, oh my God, somebody gonna kill this child, and they get on the other side of that teenage age, and it's like, you ain't the same person. And usually if you are able to go there, that was more about you being consistent, patient, and understanding, right? Trying to ride it through the best way. It's like riding a buck and bronco. If you can stay on for that 8 minutes, okay,
you are the winner.
You are, somebody's winning. At least break it even, right? And so so again, it's about balance. You get some people say, oh, sometimes these people are trying to be their children's friends. Being nice to children ain't about being friends. It's about being nice to children.
Right. I think another piece of this puzzle is that people have to understand you have to build a rapport with your children, and the rapport, the connection.
What you mean? What
A
you mean
relationship.
rapport with your children?
You need to build some kind of understanding with your child.
They're,
And
they're
and,
just a
and two
fixture in the house. Did you know that? They're just a
children are supposed
reflection
to
of
be
me.
seen and not heard, huh?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna be nice because that's that old in me. You know that.
Yeah.
What you talking about?
Well, listen, in 2021, it's probably going to be best for you to build a relationship with your child. And I'm not saying be best friends with them, but you need to come to an understanding of the parent-child dynamic. And there's some gives and some takes in there. And your child has to be able to trust you. And part of that is role modeling behaviors. Because a lot of these kids, young people, that people are saying, where are the parents at? Well, if you find the parents, you'll notice they ain't much different than the kid. Let's just be honest about it. And it's just like, well, the apple don't fall too far from the tree type of situation. So again, it goes back to that intergenerational trauma piece, but it's not a solution. And again, we want to go straight to just inflicting violence on kids so they're not shooting each other in the streets. And that's not it. We need a whole different approach to how we are rendering and cultivating our children. Because what we have right now on a massive scale is not working for Black children. It's really not. And we are more concerned, and this is me getting on the that class of have somes. We are more concerned with things like critical race theory than what's really happening in the homes and in the communities of Black kids.
Oh man, you trying to get us put off of Facebook? Although there's some stuff that should be put off of Facebook.
Yes,
That's still on there.
like the
But
video I sent you earlier.
yeah, yeah. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Toxic.
I wish. I don't even know if I want you to show that video, man. It's like it was so off the chain.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a young man on the video. I don't know what he call himself doing, little bony self, and you got a little baby in front of him, a young child in front of him, a young child behind him on the bed.
Yeah.
He is ignoring the mother of his child. She's saying put your headphones on so she ain't got to hear what he's doing, right? He says no, and then the next thing you know, the two of them are fighting in front of the children.
Yeah. At one point, I think one of the children might have got rolled over too, because that kid was on the bed,
right,
and they were fighting on the bed. I don't know.
And then he get up, and between the little battles, it went on for a minute, right?
It's a 17-minute video.
Yeah, and he plays like a victim. Get on there, see, man, this is what I got to put up with. And then he's telling her now she's pregnant, right?
Yeah, I found that out towards the end of the video, which is crazy.
She's pregnant, and he talking about I don't care nothing about you. I just care about you carrying my child, and so I ain't gonna do this with you and this kind of stuff. And I'm wondering who because the other ones ain't that old, right? No. Them other two kids are under 5.
Yes,
they look like they're under 5
they may
for
be
real.
Under 3.
Yeah, see, I was being nice, and then they look like they ain't barely over 2 themselves, right? and they're doing this in front of the children, and evidently they must have done this before, because one child in the back like refereeing, ain't crying, refereeing,
yeah,
and then the other one crying, right? And the response to the video was bad enough. The response was even worse, because you had dudes talking about, what one dude said, only thing wrong with her is she's hungry. That was the response. So the dudes are all taking dude's side. At least there was a couple people who recognized there were children there, because you swear there wasn't no children there the way they was responding, right? I'd have whooped her butt, and and he's a loser, and and it's like, oh my God, we got this adult of this battle of adults who say they're adults, right, to this video. Ain't nobody really talking about these babies that's in the middle of this bullcrap.
Right.
And so that's the sad part for me, right? And I understand, but make it even worse is, even though it's sad to me, I understand it. I understand it, right? Because we still, as I say, we haven't put our arms around our experience as African Americans in this country that's been based around trauma, especially if you got um, American slavery in your background, even more so where your experience here in America has been trying to combat trauma
Mm.
and make a life out of it in spite of it. But if we get even closer, because some people, even our people, don't want to talk about that history stuff. Man, that happened
No.
back in the old days. Let's go back 40 years. All we got to do is go back 40
To the
years.
70s.
Yeah. The 70s, late 70s, early 80s, the crack era, when children truly had to fend for themselves.
Right.
Those children are 45, 46
Yeah.
years old.
Their grandparents.
Yes.
Many of them.
And they had to struggle through trauma using child brain,
Mm.
undeveloped child's brains.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
And then some of them end up raising a whole community full of undeveloped child brains.
Wow.
So the certain traumas and the certain dumb crap, I'm keeping it clean this week, I ain't gonna use no swear words, becomes normal, becomes fun, right? And so again, when you ask a child, where do you feel safe? Where do you feel safe? And they can't come up with a clear answer. Or if that answer says every place but home.
Mm.
Or back in the day, see, the other options we had back in the day, though, when I was growing up, right, I used to get shipped to my grandmother's house.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because grandmother was a lot there was a generational kind of age difference, right, for grandmother. There's not that. When we shrunk the generations, we shrunk the wisdom,
right,
of our community, and it's been shrunk, man. Because the thing is, I didn't feel safe at home in the nice little Christian home.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother, she was a trip, but she was safer than she was safer than being at home. I knew if I did my chores and kind of stayed out of her hair and went to church with her, and I was pretty much could do whatever I wanted to do, long as I didn't get, long as I didn't do nothing too outrageous to shame her.
Right.
And so when they said I'll be with her all summer, I would be in tears when they would send me back home.
Wow. I think it's been like that for quite some time. I would say my generation's probably the last that had grandma's home as a sanctuary or escape from the trauma. Because I had that. Like, I lived with my grandma pretty much most of my adolescence. And that was an opportunity for me to just kind of get away from the riffraff at my nuclear family home for the most part. But after that, like, what I've seen as a therapist, what I've seen as someone who's worked with programs, grandma's house is just as chaotic as any other place.
Absolutely. Now,
and sometimes grandma's the problem.
Hey,
I didn't have that experience, but I've seen it in other homes for sure.
Hey, wait a minute. I had two grandmas. Okay. I had two. Now the other one, heck no. It means, golly, she'd rather hit you than look at you. It's like, oh my God. I mean, angry. And because I understand trauma now, I didn't when I was a kid. She had legitimate anger, but it wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She had legitimate trauma, but it wasn't supposed to be about me. Right? And that emotional instability, man, that we carry as adults, right? And again, if we truly, one of the things I've been able to do, I've seen brothers be able to change their lives and save their lives by narrowed down, getting them narrowed down to really focusing on what's good for their children. And less about being the victim of a relationship. Little late for that, knucklehead. Little late.
Right, right.
Or what about no, little late. You done made these babies, and in some cases, you done made these babies with somebody who's just dysfunctioning your ass. Oh, there I go. See, I couldn't get away with it.
You almost had it, man.
I almost had it.
32 minutes in.
Yeah, golly, man. I guess we need to come up with a little coin jar for my behind. Like,
I'm about to
yeah,
get a sound machine, so every time you drop one, I'm gonna just have a little sound of coins dropping in a jar or something.
uh, you know. And like, but again, I mean, once I was able to really, and it was interesting how hard sometimes to get them to narrow down to the child. But you know how made it easy when I would say, "How was life in the house you grew up in?"
Mm,
Oh my God!
wow.
And how did you feel?
Yeah.
Ain't nobody ever asked them how they felt.
Right.
And so, how do you think your babies feel now? And I've seen dudes start crying.
Wow.
How do you think babies feel? How do you think your babies felt when that remember that situation that got you here with me in the group, and you tried to minimize the situation, and your charge was violence in the presence of a child. So your child was right there.
Right.
That's part of your charge. Well, it's her fault. She was holding this. I'm not trying to talk about you and her right now. Now you keep telling me, man, she ain't gonna tell me what to do with my child, and I can't see my child like that. Right now, what is gonna be best for your child right now? That might mean you got to do something you didn't want to do, like get you some legal representation. Well, I ain't got no money. Well, I got some folks who will help you if you help yourself. Now what? I didn't ask you what you should have to do. You didn't have to have no babies either, but you did. Okay? And they've done well. Now, do they have any pain behind? I mean, I ran into some of my guys. I remember. I'll never forget this time when I ran into one of my guys at the out at the Mega Mall one day, walking around out there, and this young lady come up to me, and I like telling this story. So if you heard it before, so what? Runs up to me and says, Mr. Simmons," like, I don't know the little girl, right? And the look I gave her, because people who know me know I can give you some looks, like, and it's like, um, uh, and why are you talking to me, right? Kind of look. She says, "I know you don't know me, but my boyfriend used to be in one of your groups, and he's standing over the side because he ain't that bold because he remember being in my group. You don't know how Mr. Simmons might respond, right? And I just want to thank you." Now think about it. She's thanking me, and then he come over and he tells me, this is my fiance, uh, uh, you know, uh, uh, and we get to talking. He's, the mother of his child. He's not with her any longer. She's still giving him difficulties with, being with his child and that kind of stuff. And he talks about he started doing legal things to be with his children, and that he was more hopeful and that he was happier and that kind of thing. But but at the same time was able to identify it's not always easy. See, so often we do what's easy in the moment without no regard of the consequences for you and the people you say you care for. Too often, right? and and you know, so and you see this, and then so when you start seeing certain behaviors out of some of our young folks, now granted, some of these young folks doing the stuff they're doing out in the street didn't all come from what we would want to call, whatever we want to call, dysfunctional homes or
Mhm.
highly dysfunctional homes, right? But one of the things we do, one of the things I do recognize is there has become a attitude, and then, you know, and I can see the old people don't. Yeah, see, I told you, there's an attitude of being uh, 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 getting noticed
Mhm.
to fill in my emotional gaps of belonging, being important. Like being important almost takes the place of being loved, right?
Mhm.
And I know it's hard for some of us elders, if that's, you know, I'm using the words everybody else want to use, you know, for us old people, to put our minds around the fact that some of what we're seeing is not, you know, it's gang, might be gang like behavior, because anytime you're doing group shit, it's, there you go again. That's true. It is seen as gang behavior,
Right.
but what I'm seeing is YouTube behavior, right?
Mm.
You think about it. You commit a crime, you kill somebody, you have a shootout or whatever, and then you post it on Facebook or YouTube,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
that's this generation. It ain't just that though. Going back to the parents in the home, we got parents beating and disciplining their kids on live. Like it's supposed to teach their kids a lesson. It's like what is going
And then when the people roll into your home, who you say don't
They
care nothing
racist.
about you, which might be true, right?
Yeah, then they being
And take
racist.
your kids. Then you're gonna come to somebody like me crying, talking about what they did to you.
It's crazy, man.
You know, and you'll come crying. Well, man, you know, this system don't care nothing about us. They just want to take our children and all like that. Okay, did you know that beforehand?
Mm.
Or did you just learn that? And so if you knew that, why was you doing this behavior on Facebook, on YouTube? So you know that would be like having a lion in the corner, and I look at you and I tell you to take this piece of bologna, put it on your head, and stick your head in the lion's mouth and think it won't chomp down.
Mm.
You know the lion will bite, but you still play with the lion. Uh,
Man.
I mean, ugh.
Yeah.
But again, we have to have some compassion for folks. Because again, some of these people that you have seen on Facebook, I've had clients who would have been them,
Right.
right? Who that once you can sit them down and connect the dots. I don't fully blame them for their little craziness. But if you break it down and help them break it down with the experiences and connect the dots to their experience, what else was they going to do?
Right. Do they know any better?
Right.
What you can't expect something high expectations for someone who doesn't have them for themselves at the end of the day.
Right. And you can't, because we good. You know, we talk about the white system. Oh, we good at talking bad about each other. Oh my God. I mean, talking about not having no compassion.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he should have known better. No, how? How? And especially, we've talked about this idea of survival stress management, living in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Living in the moment, right? Whatever feels good in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And feeling good in the moment is getting yourself hyped. getting with my partners and bum rushing the store, and then we all go home and we got new TVs and stuff that we ain't gonna take care of, and we got some little money in our thing, and then we can sit back and drink us some Hennessy, that nasty stuff, some Hennessy, and talk about, man, did you see how scared them people was when we went in the store, man? Oh man, we was bad, man. Oh my God, man. Oh man, they're like ooh ooh. The adrenaline rush from that. And then people gonna talk about, well, we just got to give them more consequences. Man, them folks wasn't scared about no consequences. It's like if you got 15 folks who run up in there, you might be able to scare off maybe 4 of them if they knew what the consequences, how high the consequences were, right? But when you're doing stuff in the moment and for the thrill, to feel alive,
yeah,
because we got walking emotional corpses out here.
Wow.
So and then one other thing that just came up and has been in the news for a lot, and it keep coming up is us being so scared and offended that more of our kids are committing direct suicide. We've been committing indirect suicide for years.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody called it that. There was a doctor who did call that.
Yeah, Dr. Bobby E. Wright out of Chicago, he called it menticide.
Yeah, and then before him, the doctor that used to do the Bill Cosby show, he wrote a book on it.
Oh, Cobbs.
No, Passant or what?
Yeah. Oh man, out of Philadelphia.
Yeah, he even called it indirect suicide. So we're talking about over 20 years. He's talking about over 20 years ago, right? But now we're actually seeing more direct suicide. But again, if you got on the other side of a survival stress management, on the other side of that is hopelessness.
Right.
Okay. And if you ask young people, I remember there's a survey I used to do when we was doing our groups live, where they would answer these 20 questions, and one of the questions was, "Do you believe you live in a war zone?" Over 70% of them said yes. They ain't been nowhere outside the country.
Right.
And so if you got a high level of homicide, why is it you are surprised you're going to end up having a high level of you're going to eventually have a high level of suicide? Because all the kids in those neighborhoods, there's kids in those neighborhoods who get forgotten about because we spend so much time with the ones acting the fool.
Yeah. Squeaky wheel gets the grease.
We spend so much time with the ones acting the fool that the babies who are trying to do it, and ironically, we get mad as Black people because the same thing happens to us. The more we try to do the right thing according to white folks, the more certain white folks get upset and get jealous and want to take us out. Let me shut up.
So that psychologist, he's actually a psychiatrist, Dr. Alvin Passant.
Yes.
Who used to work with Bill Cosby. Yep. So, Ted, I want to touch on what you said about the walking corpses, because I think that's a profound statement that needs to emotional corpses. That needs to be broken down a little bit. What would you say to someone who doesn't realize that it's emotional issues? Because I think a lot of folks are operating, and they're operating at a norm of this trauma. And they don't realize that it's trauma. They don't realize that it's impulse or emotional control. They don't see it as a problem. They see it as, this is what everyone else is doing. This is normal. How do we work with that? Like, how do we help shift that behavior or that mindset to make sure that people are safe and children have a chance? Because, I don't know.
Well, man, you the professional.
I'm asking the questions here.
Hey, wait a minute. Whoa.
I got
Don't
some
be
ideas
playing with me, man. I do that to clients. You ain't going to do it to me. Okay, you know, pose something in it. What do you think? But no, man. In doing this work, what I've learned, at least what's become a little clearer to me in doing this work around trauma, and doing this work around trauma with the Black community, is that emotional health awareness is the key.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, we go to school and we're taught about mental health, we're taught about trauma, and we taught a certain way to address it and what it looks like. Over the years, we realize it don't look the same in a traumatized people.
Right.
Our community is a traumatized community.
Right.
We have made peace with the trauma in some ways.
Right.
We have built a culture around surviving the trauma.
Right.
Right. And they often will say, well, you Black people are too emotional. Well, that's part of that, right? We have this emotional conflict we live with, right? And then the more, and ironically, the emotional conflict becomes less for the brother who take on street life than it does for the person who become middle class.
Right.
Okay? Become middle class.
Yeah, it's
right?
another dimension enters once you become middle class, because
Right.
you're stuck in this. We should probably do a show on this, but we're stuck in this kind of double consciousness
Right.
kind of area, but it's a more modern version where it's like 3 levels of consciousness. It's a triple
Yes.
consciousness.
Yeah, triple consciousness.
So you have I need to maintain my Blackness,
Right.
but I
Whatever
also
that
have
is defined as these
whatever
days.
that is. I also have to survive in these predominantly white spaces and places
or
and systems.
spaces and ideals.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Because we got Black communities that still struggle for that same thing. They might not be white, but they're still, sorting through them
Right.
white ideals. Okay,
Right.
let's keep it clear. Okay,
Right.
continue.
And
Because
they don't.
not everybody lives in Minnesota. Not
No,
everybody lives in
I
Minnesota.
understand that, but also not only do they struggle with those white ideals, they don't see any other way. Like, either I'm going to be back to where I was that wasn't helping me, or I have to submit and just fully assimilate. And I think that you can just be who you are without the full assimilation. But that's that piece. But then you're also a victim of the system at the same time. So you have
Right.
this like triple kind of what are those graphs called when you have those 3 circles that all kind of, is it a hexagon or whatever? You got all these like circles that merge into each other, and that's what we see with a lot of those folks. And they don't want to give up that Black side of themselves, but then they'll be the ones who put their heads down when stuff happens. It's a whole nother phenomenon.
Well, but the thing is, but see, again, when we talk about the emotional stuff, right? We got a portion that just go all out emotional. I mean, just emotional buck wild, right? And again, when we're talking about these walking emotional corpses, is they're just reacting to anything that pops off, right?
Okay.
And believe they have a right to,
Right.
and it's like when I have conversations about what is respect with my guys, and I tell them, if you got more things, a long list of what is you think is disrespectful, you're gonna have a problem.
Right.
If me looking at you too long is disrespectful, now we both gonna have a problem, right? Because I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with you, and why you rolling up on me, and it's like what so now we're acting out emotionally, not managing our emotions at all, and making situations that are bad even worse, right? And so when we start talking about that person who got to deal with, trying to keep their Blackness, whatever the hell that is, okay, and I mean exactly that. Okay, because that definition can
Yeah.
move no matter
Man.
where that can move within your own black community, and you see that in larger cities that got large black
Yeah.
communities in them, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so you got that, and then you got to deal with this white system or white folks. And then you start realizing that once I figure out how to navigate that, I might make some more money or
Right.
whatever. And then I got to deal with the emotions around all of that when it comes to my family.
Right. Just being.
Yeah. So I try now. So to meet with the white stuff, I do all the stuff that was defined as being healthy, right?
Mm.
The right stuff. Not only just from the white community, but the black community. Because see, there's a
Mm-hmm.
part of the black community that is so judgmental that we have to honor
Mm-hmm.
it too. Especially the deeper we get into the Christian community. Now I done got in trouble,
Oh,
man.
it's Sunday. Come on now.
It's like
We only
why,
got 8 minutes
man?
left. Don't do this now. Don't do this.
All that judgmental stuff. So I'm trying to do the right thing by everybody, and it ain't none of it leaves me room to be me. Right? And so
Yeah.
I do all the right stuff, and I still don't get a good outcome. What do I do with that?
Mm.
Right? And then you want to be surprised why, in a lot of those young people that they're talking about have increased suicidal thoughts and suicide behavior, they're not necessarily the kids that are necessarily in the hood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They might live in the hood, but they ain't trying to do some of that crazy stuff.
Yep. They're caught.
Right? Or they're in the suburbs, trying to fit in, right? Say, badly, if you got a black child who live in the suburb and they're one or two black kids and they're hanging out with their little white friends and, who are trying to be more black than them and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, and I don't have no skills to deal with these emotions and talk about these emotions without somebody criticizing me, kind of trying to make me feel bad for having these emotions.
Right.
Right. So it's better to be numb, or it's better to get caught up in the video games when I can deal with the one emotion that is acceptable, not just in our own community, but in America: anger, explained or not. Right?
Yeah.
Because we're not the only ones who got these emotional problems, but the issue is this way of denying our emotions, but because the more you deny them, the more you act them out, right? And so we act out the emotions. Then we want people to think. Then we want people to accept our sorry. Well, you're gonna do it again if you ain't managing your emotions, and then you deal with a system that don't. You already know that don't care as much about you, right? And they're not going to allow your sorry ain't going to mean nothing to them,
right?
And then they hold you accountable without no compassion, right? And then you get other folks who don't hold you accountable. Oh yeah, I understand. As a black man, it's hard out here for you. Oh, okay. We done that so well. I've seen black women who done got beat up by their black man who will say, I know he didn't mean it because it's hard out here for a black man. Okay. Not trying to have it. Somewhere along the line, no matter what's going on with you, you got to find some way to manage that emotion so you can manage yourself and not make things worse. But like you said before, for the most part, I've been lucky enough as this old Negro to be as best I can myself. There's a price I pay for that, right? Oh, there's damn right. There I go again. And, I'm probably that with that three.
Sorry, I'm gonna have that coin machine in about 2 weeks. I might have it next week. We'll see how quick this delivery gets.
But manage this to be me, right? and it's not always good, but it also means that there's people who can't who love you but ain't comfortable
They
around
can't
you.
deal with you. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
Because you're consistently yourself,
Yeah.
you know? I mean, and can't deal with you because you don't chastise them. It's amazing how many of our people, if you ain't chastising them, you ain't loving them.
That goes back to the discipline conversation. We are
I
so
mean, it's
used to
like,
being beat
dog.
up and talked dogged out that we don't know what genuine relationships feel like without it.
Well, but again, it makes sense because there's a fine line. There's a fine line. I'm gonna end on this quote between understanding and an excuse.
Mm, mm. You want to break that down a little bit? There's a thin line between understanding and excuse.
Right. Because I can understand you, but I don't have to allow you to use it as an excuse.
Hmm.
Because it might be an excuse for your behavior, but that don't mean we got to stay there.
Hmm.
Right. It's like when the reason that I come up with that is because when people start talking about why do you talk about historical trauma, ain't you making excuse for black people? No, I'm helping them understand how and connect the dots about what's going on, what they're going on with them right now is connected to what happened to them and their ancestors in the past.
Hmm.
If they want to use it as an excuse about why they can't do no better, that's on them.
Right.
That's what I mean.
Mm. Well, we only got a few minutes left. I mean, I think we touched on this pretty well. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Our children. I've said this multiple times in this podcast and other platforms. I really think that if we want to heal the community, I don't like using that term heal, but if we want to start the healing process in the community, I think one of the strategies is to be child focused and doing things for the betterment of the children that are coming up and being very intentional about making sure that the environments that these children interact in are affirming, are loving and healing can take place. And I hate to say this, but with many people who are quote unquote leaders in the community, I don't see that as a focus. I feel like our children kind of get left behind, but they're used as talking points. But when it comes to strategy and implementation, they often get left behind unless they are shooting up the place, or taking cars and doing carjackings. Then they'll get some attention. Outside of that, like I don't see a huge focus on attention um, on our children. I think that that's really one of the places that we can easily spend our time, and that will highlight some of the shortcomings we have as a collective, like our relationships, um, like our health, things of that nature. If we really focused in on children, and honestly, I would say from conception to 10 years old is a great time frame to really implement, institutions and strategies for children. Because if you could do that, if you can start that foundation for a child, I think we can steer around some of the other things that end up happening. Stuff's gonna still happen, but at least we're giving a nice affirming foundation for those kids, giving them a good start to keep moving forward. So those would be my parting words for today. Any final thoughts from you in the last minute or so?
The village that hides the truth cannot expect to heal, but to pass on the pain.
Hmm. That's going to do it for us today, folks. This is another installment of the Healing Brothers podcast. I'm your co-host, Brandon Jones, along with the legendary Sam Simmons. We will be back next Sunday, 3 p.m. Central Time. Be sure to share this with the folks that you care about and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Healing Brothers Podcast. We'll see you next week. Peace.